So we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining this panel this morning. Our topic is the next wave of personalized navigation and social networking. My name is Jonathan Weitz. I'm the partner leading the media practice at IBB Consulting Group. We're a strategy boutique working on business strategy and technology strategy for media companies, studios, cable networks, consumer electronics companies, and mobile operators. We work on everything from business strategy through to executing new product launches. And I think now is a really interesting time to be talking about this topic in particular. Our clients are really asking us right now, how do we get more out of user engagement across platforms using various devices, second screen engagement, and then how do we use that engagement to drive more monetization across advertising and commerce and subscriptions and driving more tune-in to our linear shows. So with that, we'd like to do a quick round of introductions with our panelists, and if you could introduce yourself, please, and also tell us sort of what you're working on in this area right now.
First, yeah, so my name's Tom Weiss. I founded TV Genius about 7 years ago, and we exited this August. So we're now part of Red Bee Media, and I guess our kind of view is, there's this problem that people have that they still can't really find that much to watch on TV. There's some research we've done recently in Europe where I think 74% of people said that weekly they struggle to find anything to watch, and they've all got sort of 300 channels each. So we've always looked for solutions to do that. So we've got a recommendation engine, we've got a search engine, we've got a social engine, and what we do is we then go and license that to the platforms and the broadcasters. So we've got about 30 deployments across Europe, and I guess it's our view that content discovery has historically been owned by whoever has the EPG, and I guess our view is those people will probably be the people who continue to own it. So what we want to do is help enable them to own it.
My name's Mark Ruxin. I was originally scheduled to speak to open up the advertising panel. So for 5 years, I was the Chief Innovation Officer for IPG, for McCann Erickson and Universal McCann. By the time this conference happened, I had left IPG and started a social mobile game. We're still in stealth mode, so I'd be happy to talk about Second Screen as it relates to advertising, and then talk a little bit about the app that we've built that's initially focused around the music space.
This is Sham Ratneyogi. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Miso. We are a second screen platform that makes the TV watching experience better by using mobile devices, laptops, tablets, and so forth.
Great, thank you. I want to start the discussion with a question that our clients have been wrestling with recently, which is that there seems to be, in user experiences, two kinds of consumers, and you guys have probably seen this with your companies as well, that there seems to be kind of lean forward consumers who really want to engage deeply, and there are sort of lean back folks who just want to sit there with their remote and switch channels. And in kind of a world where we are using smartphones and tablets to engage directly with the TV experience, where do you see the successes today, with your company or with others, in terms of what consumer experiences really work well to engage consumers the best on these second screen platforms?
I'll start. I think as we look at the space, I don't think there is it depends on what you're watching. I don't think there's hey, every single show lends itself to a lean forward experience. Because some shows lend itself to, it engulfs you into the story and you just want to, there's a lot of it, True Blood is different than NFL, which is different than, reality show. So as we look at sort of case studies and success stories, it's more about hey, what is happening in this genre, and what are people doing in that specific genre. So obviously people talk about the reality shows and what X Factor is doing, and with Twitter, and what The Voice has done in terms of using social media. But how do you take advantage of this second screen for all types of categories is something that we're trying to solve for. Is how do you create a platform that can enable the creativity of the market to build interesting experiences regardless of the type of content. So, because sports is even in sports, baseball is different than NFL, which is completely different than, boxing, as a matter of fact. So how do we make something that works for those types of shows?
I'd just further elaborate. there's the lean forward nature of some programming, and in some cases it's going to be more applicable than others. But I also think there's a difference between lean forward experiences that are social and information gathering specifically. So, IMDb, for example, is a great second screen experience to have when you're watching movies. It's not at all social. I think for fantasy sports players, just checking stats specifically off of ESPN or Fox Sports or whatever is a totally natural thing. Neither of those things are social. And then some of the brands that you're talking about, whether it be American Idol or X Factor or something like that, those are both social and second screen. So I think if you delineate between those experiences that are relevant and lean forward, but also social, you can further kind of segment out what people want to do. And I think a lot of times, people are in for just a quick burst that has nothing to do with what the rest of the world is thinking. And you're starting to see with whether it's tablets or your phones, and I'm looking kind of at my own life. There's always a way to augment the experience just by adding a little bit of information that can happen very quickly.
There's an interesting thing that we've seen on, one of the things we do is we analyse all of the Twitter traffic that's going on around TV shows. And we've done some sentiment analysis on it. And it's one of the things that's really interesting. If you compare sentiment analysis on Twitter to sentiment analysis from appreciation panels, you get markedly different results. So if you look at appreciation panels, on average, people like shows that they watch, because they wouldn't be watching it if they didn't like it. Yeah? And it averages about 8.2, and it's an even distribution around there, 8.2 to 10. If you look on Twitter, people either absolutely love the show or they completely hate it. So kind of my logic is, why are people watching the show if they hate it? We know that people generally don't. So presumably it's people who are in the room while other people are watching it. And you've got this kind of situation where someone's watching it and you're forced to watch it, so therefore they're commenting on it. And I think, there's an effort to try and make the show different. And then you've got these few people who just love it and talk about it. But it does seem to be different. And I don't think social is something that's really being pushed by anyone that much. I mean, TV's always been social. We've always talked about TV. It's just we're using different media to do it now.
I mean, as it relates to, in terms of, Mark, what you're saying in terms of the social, I don't think every show is social. It's just when does that conversation occur and when do people talk about it? Hey, when you're watching The Walking Dead, it's not like you want to talk about it the entire time you're watching it. But afterwards it makes sense. So there's with reality shows, given that there's a lot of downtime, there's spike in sort of activity during the show because you don't have to pay attention every single second versus scripted dramas where you're paying attention. Hey, you might want to get information. How can we deliver you a piece of information? Get in, get out, and go back and paying attention to the show. So people say, hey, how do you layer a social activity on top of TV? Well, first of all, I agree with you. All TV is social, but the question is when does that activity occur that's optimizes to a better experience? And I think, not all shows are considered equal, and therefore not all shows are gonna, it doesn't have to be social while you're watching TV on a two-screen medium for it to be successful. It doesn't.
I'd be interested to know what you think about the drama. I mean, one of the things that we found is we've tried correlating social media traffic with the ratings. Yeah, and the only shows where we find correlation is on drama. Mm-hmm. Yeah, drama, it seems, yes, you get more social media activity when more people are watching it, but reality TV, comedy, it doesn't seem to correlate. I mean, is that something? Do you find a similar thing on drama? Or?
Yeah, I mean, our company historically focused on sort of the check-in space where people checked into what they're watching, gets rewards and so forth, and we've done everything from driving more engagement, from ratings to chatter streams and so forth over the last year. It's interesting, like you'd think the reality shows would always be number one in the space, but it turns out that a lot of drama, like The Walking Dead, True Blood when it was out, Mad Men's gonna start in January, it's gonna be number one. Like people love to say that they're watching certain types of shows. There's something about, we forget, even in our category, people don't want to share every single thing that they watch, and some people don't want to talk about every single thing they watch either, but it's to say that you're watching something of high value, like saying you watch Mad Men is actually somewhat cool, because then you're like, oh, I'm hip, and I know what I'm, I watch something of sort of intelligent, sort of there's deeper insights about history and so forth. But saying you watch Jersey Shore may be great the first time, but talking about it every single week, not that cool anymore. So like there's this social norm that sort of comes into that we have to remember, is that when it comes to two-screen activity, what the content is actually affects our behavior, and we have to recognize that, and so we have to accommodate any sort of two-screen behavior as a result of that content. So, not all drama is considered equal. I mean, we can all talk about the drama shows that people love to talk about. I mean, we know it. I mean, I don't even watch it, and I know what it is, because the conversations happen always.
I want to ask you specifically about the DirecTV. Maybe just for our audience, if you can explain kind of how it works and what are you finding consumers are really using it for today?
Yeah, so we have a relationship with DirecTV. We also have the relationship with AT&T Uverse, where the mobile device synchronizes with the set-top box. So it knows what you're watching. First of all, it discovers whether there's a set-top box in your house. It discovers whether there's 1 or 2 or 4. The average American has 2, so you can connect to the right box. And once you connect to it, it says, here's what you're watching. But it also tells you, like, here's where you are specifically in the TV show. This is I think this is going to be an ongoing trend in the next 12, 18 months, where historically the MSOs, pay TV providers, it's sort of a closed ecosystem, and they're going to open it up, not in sort of a Facebook specific way where it's like, hey, everybody has access to everything that we have in the box. Obviously, there's a lot of sensitivity to that. We've been speaking to, you name any MSO in the United States, we have had some conversation in some shape or form to say, hey, how can we collaborate to deliver value on the second screen? And ultimately they said, well, we can't do this all ourselves. Well, how do we partner to go make it happen? So we're helping them. They're using our platform for not only the social features, but also doing more deeper synchronized experiences on their own, because they all have their second screen strategy as well. They have Xfinity, DirecTV has their own iPad app. Working with them, we as all the sort of second screen companies that are out there, we're probably one of the only companies that take the daunting task of working with the sort of painful yet painful process of working with DirecTV, but hey, they've been great and they want to collaborate, and I think that's going to be a new shift in what we see in the next 18, 24 months.
So when you have a platform like that, what does that enable you to do with consumers now?
First of all, it's about how do people watch TV today? We can talk about over the top. We can talk about people watch things through Netflix and stuff through the internet on the TV. But let's be honest. Like, all of us probably have our pay TV service. Like, no one's cutting cords like tomorrow. Like, maybe in the next 20 years, maybe something's going to change. HBO Go has started some interesting trend. But for the most part, we sign up for Comcast, we sign up for Dish, DirecTV, Cox, Cablevision, whatever you have in your area. So the fact that they can market solutions is important. It's hard to change behavior, especially when it comes to TV. People just don't change overnight. It's not like, hey, just because we have this two-screen behavior doesn't mean they're going to jump on and be like, oh, let's do it. We have to remember people are there to watch TV, and that's their first thing they're going to do. So anything else is secondary value. They're here to watch content. So the fact that we can work with DirecTV to push new types of experiences is important. So it's about distribution. It's about level of data, level of access. They have the relationship with the consumer. It's very hard to circumvent that. Obviously, everyone's trying to circumvent them and so forth. But hey, they have the key, which is, hey, I can deliver you Big Bang Theory at 8 p.m. on CBS, and that's the way you're going to watch it. And that's what people are there to do primarily. So, but we'll see. Like, I think the next year is going to be about collaboration. It's going to shift from this year, which is, hey, I think there's something here, to next year there's going to be a larger commitment to the category. But I don't think next year is going to be the breakthrough year. I think it's going to be, we have another 12, 18 months before we actually do something. And honestly, if you look at interactive TV over the last 10 years, now we can actually develop technology faster. So we should try lots and lots of things. And this is not the year to be slow, not be afraid. Let's get things out there. And I think that's something that we've at least tried to consistently do in our company. Even if it fails, it's better than that, than 18 months. People say, oh, interactive TV, round 3, we did it 10 years ago, and then 10 years prior to that, and dial-up modems, and prior to that, buying hardware. I mean, we have to be committed to the space, and I think the MSOs are going to help that.
Mm-hmm. So we've talked about interactivity and how that really personalizes the experience. I think It seems like one area that people are experimenting with a lot right now is recommendations. And sort of a question for all three of you, really, the systems that you're building are obviously throwing off a ton of data. How do you use things like that, as well as things like the Facebook social graph and Twitter? How do you use all those sort of data streams to improve the recommendations that you're giving to your users?
So when I can comment. I'd say it's not for us. Historically, everyone's done kind of recommendations based on this user activity, on Amazon or the Netflix type approach. I guess the weakness of that is it relies. You have to know quite a lot about the user. So if you're someone like Netflix and you rented a bunch of movies, then yes, you can get someone to do it. But if you look at your average video on demand environment, you go into the VOD store the first time, doesn't necessarily know anything about you. Yeah. And it's the first time users that you can't really address, I think, with that approach. So yes, you can use the social graph to get more information. You can put it into the recommendation engine, but also you can actually use it to personalize those initial recommendations better. And we've been finding that works. That works a lot. I mean, it works very effectively. I guess with the Facebook Watch action rolling out, it'll be interesting to see how things change there. I know, at the moment it's only really online, and I haven't seen any view to how that can be done on a TV. But that's going to give Facebook a lot more information about what people are watching on different areas, which of course will be able to be mined by anyone who goes in there. And I think at the moment there's still a bit of a thing about who's got more data, and kind of Facebook might democratize that a little bit, which I think would change the dynamics slightly.
I think recommendations is a really tough problem. I mean, we do a lot of user research every week and say, hey, what do people want? And they're like, hey, it's hard to find stuff when you watch TV. But if you actually, what we found, if you dig one level deeper beyond this idea of there's an opportunity about helping people decide what to watch, we've actually done some research that actually has shown that why is Seinfeld and Friends still on TV? Like, why do people know that it's very stressful. People have massive backlogs of DVR shows. There's so much overwhelming advertising to say, watch this show, watch that show. I think people complain because it's like, oh man, I wish there was only like 3 channels and 3 shows and people knew what I wanted and just give it to me. But it turns out that most people watch Seinfeld and Friends because it's comfort. It's like they're there to be entertained and there to be relaxed, and they always go back to shows they feel comfortable with. It takes a huge amount of investment to shift people from to get to a new show. It's like why the network spends so much money in advertising and say, hey, watch this new show. It's just the mental hurdle of an individual to say, hey, I'm going to commit myself to watching this new show that's going to start in January on USA Network. It's just a daunting task, actually, not only for the network, but for the individual itself. So my take is, I don't really know whether this is a challenge for us as an industry. I'm not sure if recommendations is really what is going to be a game-changing aspect for our business. Even if you think about Friends, we have a social graph all centered around, hey, what are my friends watching? I can see what my friends are watching. I see what my friends are watching all the time. It doesn't change what I want to watch. I mean, if you really, really think about it, if I see that Mark is watching, Jersey Shore, it's like, oh my God, I need to go watch Jersey Shore season 3 episode. It's like, okay, good information, but go back to do whatever I'm doing. I'm sort of challenging this aspect. Like, no one needs to I never watched the whole entire season of Lost. I haven't watched The Wire. No one needs to tell me that I need to watch The Wire and you should watch it. Like, seriously, I've heard that from offline conversations every day. The difference is that when you look at Amazon recommendations, you look at all the other tools, they're trying to help you save money. But entertainment is no one wants to optimize time. People are okay spending a minute or 2 minutes just browsing because they like to complain, because everybody likes to complain. You can create a recommendation engine and people still complain about Netflix. Everybody complains about Netflix. Everybody complains about Amazon recommendations, even though they spend millions and millions of dollars. People just like to complain. I don't think, I'm actually challenging us whether there's really a problem there, or people just love to complain and say, hey, I'm actually fine watching Friends again. And we've seen that research. They're like, oh, I don't know what to watch. I'll watch Friends.
I actually do think there's a problem, and I think the problem is more evident, maybe less for television than there is for film and music. But collaborative filtering has never worked, but it was always a decent solution for, the 90% of people who, don't need to go deeper than collaborative filtering will get them. But I do think, the web hasn't solved filtration in an interesting way. Collaborative filtering is flawed, but it works for lots of people. Facebook and Twitter are not taste graphs, so when people signed up for Facebook 6 years ago and they asked for your favorite TV show and movie and film, most people haven't changed those. So to the extent that your favorite movie is still your favorite movie, and your favorite show is still The Sopranos, you're in a good spot. But that hasn't been reflected, and they don't encourage you to update that. And I think with television, these are long, multi-year commitments that you're making. I think with film and music, especially when you get into genre preference, Pandora took one approach, and it's an approach that's interesting, but again, the library of music that you can listen to on Pandora is so small that for an avid music lover, it doesn't work very well. I do think on a going forward basis, the micro niches, so I do think enough people had to remind me that I should probably figure out how to catch up on Breaking Bad. And part of the problem has always been, where do you get Breaking Bad if you miss the first bunch of seasons? And I think with Netflix and Hulu and others, you can start to do that now. So I do think, 6 years ago when someone told you to start watching The Wire, it wasn't very easy for you to go do that. You either have to go buy the box set, or maybe you'd rent them on DVD. But again, I think with things like music and movies, the micro niches are more important than the collaborative filtering that's going to be surfaced. And as long as you keep following collaborative filtering via Amazon or Netflix, you're going to keep missing, and filtration will be an unsolved frustration. I think when there is a better mousetrap, and I think it is really about building a taste graph and following tastemakers, and follow the 10 people that turn you on to the 20 records a year that you need to be happy, or the 5 shows that you're going to commit to, or the 15 films that you're going to watch. So I think it's a big problem. I think it's a bigger problem in movies and music than it is on television. But I think part of it is, where do I get the stuff? Is it part of something, a package that I'm already paying for? And how do I find that 5 people whose opinions really do matter? I think you have tastemakers and followers, and it's tough to find tastemakers. And collaborative filtering doesn't work because it's not about tastemakers. It's about the amalgam of everybody.
So it's really interesting. I mean, I've got. So I mean, the two of the points I'm not quite sure I agree with that you said. So I mean, the first one is if you look at the Facebook TV likes, that's growing massively. So I mean, we launched a product where basically we're mining people's social graphs on TV. When we first started doing it back in the summer, the average that we had was 4 TV shows that everyone liked. Now an average is 6. Yeah? We're not encouraging people to like more TV shows. People just are liking more TV shows. So the user behavior doesn't seem to be people going to Facebook, like a few TV shows and never update it. People are regularly updating it. Yeah? That's just their behavior. The other thing I think you've got to consider is that when you look at it, different people get influenced by different things to watch TV shows. Yeah? So yes, there are some people who are very influenced by tastemakers. Yeah? They're influenced by what they read about in the newspaper, what their friends tell them to watch. Yeah? The vast majority of people tend to be a lot more influenced by what they see on the TV screen. What they're seeing trailers for, what they see in the EPG. Yeah? You do have a bunch of people who are very influenced by what their friends watch, but it tends to be about 10% of the population. And you've got a bunch of people who just are very unsophisticated and channel flick, but they don't watch much TV. So I think you've got very different, distinct groups of people, and when you're looking about helping them discover TV, you need different solutions. The guys who are very influenced by their social graph, you want social-based solutions. For people who are interested in stuff on the TV, you just want to improve the EPG slightly. For people who are just channel flicking, you want some kind of intelligent channel flicking. So I think there's a whole bunch of different solutions that can be applied to it. And I don't think there's any silver bullet that you can actually do with it. But I think Facebook has got a part of it. I think collaborative filtering has got a part of it, although there are very big differences between how you do that on TV and other media. But search also has a part of it. I think you need that whole variety of solutions to make an effective service.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my Uber point, and I don't think we totally disagree. I think filtration and recommendations are more important for content areas where there is more there's only so many television shows. You only have so many decisions to make vis-a-vis the number of records or music that is put out by artists, or films that are put out on a global basis. So I think it's easier to know what you like or what you might like on television than it is, what 20 records to buy, or I keep saying records, what 20,
You can't even say CDs now.
what's that? I'm going to say records because they're still records to me. But there are millions of recorded pieces of music put out every year versus maybe hundreds of television shows. So.
I think so. The difference that I would see is if you look at how people watch stuff. TV. There's absolutely no long tail. TV is a big peak and a short tail. Other kinds of media tends to be small peak, longer tail. So I think the statistical difference is there, but I think there's a huge opportunity. One of the things that convinced me when we first started TV Genius is I'm a huge jazz fan. And when we first got the algorithm up and running, I saw there was loads of jazz on TV that I wasn't aware of, and I went straight and started recording it on my DVR. And I think if you actually look at people who use these services, there's much more long-tail content on TV than people are aware of, but they just can't find it because it's not on the first page of the EPG. And I think the role of recommendations in the TV world isn't to just recommend another CD to buy because you might like a new artist. The role of recommendations in the TV world is to help people get into that longer tail.
So I'd like to ask you, all three of you now, about how do we make money on all these ideas and platforms? So I think one thing that all three of your companies have in common is that you're all part of multi-sided markets. Your company makes money in this area, your partners make money, and then you're providing things in an ecosystem to consumers as well. So those three areas. Can you tell us a little bit about how your companies are making money, or your sort of path to making more, and then how do your partners in the ecosystem profit more from some of these things?
So for starters, we're not making any money right now. We're making chump change here or there for experimental stuff. But we're in the business of attention. I think everyone is. I don't care what consumer company you're in. You're trying to capture attention. There's only 24 hours in a day, and we're in this unique gap where people are watching TV and their attention is being diverted from a TV to a second screen. So we have to first figure out how to recapture someone's attention while they watch TV. We have to figure out how to add value to their TV watching experience. Where it makes sense to do more social things, make it more social. Where to add more informational layers, the way Mark's describing with IMDb, then we'll figure out how to do that. But once attention is recaptured and people are doing things related to the content that's happening on TV in the same way, it's a $74 billion TV ad business all centered around attention. You sit, you stare, you sell ads. But I'm fairly confident that the people in this room and the people that I know and people that you guys know, people are not just sitting and staring anymore, they're multitasking. So we believe in the future where two things are going to happen. The way people create content is going to change from a one-screen world to a two-screen world. You're going to see earlier in the process, people say, hey, we recognize that there are two screens in the living room. How do we build experiences that accommodate to that experience? The second is the advertisers are going to demand it. Because if they don't, then the advertisers are going to spend more money on Facebook. They're going to go things to Zynga where people are playing Farmville when they're watching TV. And so our business is centered on attention first, but providing second screen advertising solutions. But we still have to figure out how to get people to do things related to the content and figure out what is an advertising experience to support that. Mm-hmm. And we have some ideas, but we got a long way to go.
Yeah, as someone coming from the media with a long experience in the media business, I think if you look at the past decade and the biggest companies to emerge from the technology center that we're living in today, most of those companies became massively profitable and big without selling advertising to ad agencies for consumers. So if you look at Google, they sold ads to small businesses around the world. Zynga sells, virtual currency directly to consumers. Groupon sells to small businesses. So I know how hard it is to try to, monetize and keep CPMs at scale. It's a very expensive business to service. It's about taking, young people out to lunch and hoping to get a piece of an IO. I think the best thing that this community can do is figure out how to sell entertainment experiences directly to consumers. And I think for all the naysayers 5 years ago or 3 years ago when Zynga became so topical, what is this virtual currency thing? Why are people spending money on stuff? And I think the reality is, 5 years ago, people used to walk into GameStop and spend $60 on a game and come home and play it. Now people are spending $60 in a game. And I think whatever these experiences are, whether they're second screen experiences or apps on phones or, you know, an $8 Netflix subscription, which, by the way, a lot of the problems that they're, I think if you think about Netflix, this is a diversion, but Netflix response a couple of months ago to raising prices should have been, most people don't complain about spending $16 a month on HBO. You can spend $16 on Netflix and get DVDs in the mail, or you can spend half that and get, you know, 8 times as much content on Netflix. So that was a problem unto itself. But I think for all of these platforms, you need to figure out what consumers are willing to pay for. Once there's an audience, you can figure out a seamless and elegant advertising execution. But I think the bias should be create an entertainment experience that's worth paying for, where consumers are delivered very specific value, whether it's social status or, you know, real or virtual merchandise, or, you know, more content, you know, currency to play with. So again, for any technology company, building an ad network or building an influence network and then trying to monetize it with ads, that's an incredibly difficult business with, you know, decreasing CPMs and, you know, a non-scalable sales force that, you know, you're going to have to recycle. So, and that's how we're building our business.
From our perspective, I mean, we're not trying to break anyone's business model. We think that the business model is pretty well established. You know, pay TV is a great market for us. You know, there's been a lot of talk about how pay TV is in a bad state over here. If you look in Asia, pay TV's got double-digit growth every year. So, you know, there's huge opportunities there, and the guys out there, they're willing to spend money to buy these things. You know, they want to launch these innovative services to differentiate themselves from their competitors and differentiate themselves from free models. At the same time, the free-to-air operators want to buy the same services to differentiate themselves from the pay TV operators. And, you know, there's some great growth. In Europe, there's still growth there, too. And I guess in the more mature markets, it's maybe more of a defensive strategy. But there's a lot of money in these platforms that they are looking to, you know, protect and keep. So, you know, that's always been our business model. And not just the platforms, but also the broadcasters. You know, how can they get more engagement with their shows? How can they increase their increase the advertising, get more analytics? So, you know, that's our model. We license our technology to them, and they make a load more money on top of it.
So specifically around the advertising model, there's been some discussions about how these, you know, new platforms are helping to improve targeting. They also improve, you know, engagement with audiences and keeping them interested and tuned in. And then thirdly, there's sort of this idea around a direct response channel where, you know, a second screen device can you know, provide a much more immediate and performance-based direct response channel to a 30-second spot. Do you think that it's all those three in combination, or are you finding that there's one that's, you know, kind of winning out today, or will soon?
I don't know. I mean, hopefully we'll find out in the next 12 months. I mean, I think I don't think anyone in this entire industry has figured out how to really get someone to, like, hey, I see this dress, I'm gonna go buy it right now. Like, that's a far stretch. I mean, but maybe there's a community of people that once you get in front, once you make it easy for them to do that, and there's impulse opportunities. But I don't think it's about the product. It's about the right moment, the right time. You know, I mean, obviously QVC and there's, you know, their Home Shopping Network. They have built billion-dollar company networks centered on the idea that people will sit and buy things with a phone call. So there's got to be something there. You know, we just have to figure out how to make it, how to apply it to more categories, make it super simple, and figure out what the right product opportunities are. I mean, obviously, like, you look at Gossip Girl, where it's a very fashion-driven show. You look at Project Runway, where there's a lot of brands that could actually, you know, people look at something and like, oh, I like the lipstick or whatever it is, like, I'm gonna go buy it. I don't know, I'm not that demographic, but we have to go try. I mean, this is what we got to do in the next year, is to figure it out. But I don't have a specific answer. Maybe you guys do.
So I mean, we're not seeing. So we don't see much in terms of the direct response. I mean, I think, you know, if you chat to the guys at Coca-Cola, they still say that the 30-second spot outperforms any other form of advertising, except for in-store when it comes to trying to sell more soft drinks. And I think as long as the 30-second spot still is performing for the guys who actually want to sell things, I think they're going to carry on doing it. You know, I can't see that anyone on a response basis is going to be buying soft drinks, cleaning products, or cars. You know, there might be getting more information, but people are already doing that. I mean, your point about Gossip Girl is really moot. The X Factor in the UK, they've got one of the big clothing lines which is actually sponsoring the show, and everyone has to wear clothing from this retailer, and it's all done on the X Factor website. So I don't think you need any new technology for that. Targeting, we do see more. So I mean, again, one of the interesting things about the Facebook graph is people not only like TV shows, but they also like products. So, where there's some analytics that you can provide to broadcasters particularly, where we can say, hey, the people who like all of your shows also use this cleaning product, that's something that they can then do to increase the advertising revenues that they're getting on that show. So I guess that's the hot area that we see that's relevant for us at the moment.
I think targeting matters, but as dollars continue to migrate from analog to digital, if you look at the performance of the ads that are being migrated, it's terrible. I mean, the performance is miserable. People get excited about 0.2% click-through rates on display advertising, and the blockage rates on pre-roll are similarly low. So can you see a bump when you can do slightly better targeting? Yes. But is that effective marketing spend? Probably not. And I guess I completely agree with the impulsive occasional commerce experience. And I don't think it's about having a second screen or more technology. I used to work for a company right across the street a dozen years ago, and this was at the beginning of MPEG-4 when you really could object code stuff in television, and you could click on Jennifer Aniston's sweater and buy. You could do that a dozen years ago. Maybe it's moderately easier to do it now than it is today, but I think people don't watch TV to shop. And I think the best advertising, and what increasingly you see when you go to the upfronts with advertisers these days is, branded integrations in the shows. So if you commit to buying a ton of inventory cross-platform from Time Warner or the CW, say your vitamin water, one of the things that you get is, a summer party on Gossip Girl, with, vitamin water all over the place. So I think, increasingly as DVR as DVR usage continues to penetrate, people are watching more and more TV off of on-demand platforms, so on Netflix and platforms like that. There aren't 30-second spots to skip or watch anyway. So increasingly, brands are going to start to buy the advertising to get branded integrations that will be pervasive with the shows. So, I don't think the Holy Grail was ever all that holy, and it wasn't really a grail. I think occasionally there will be that thing, and maybe it's an offer that happens within the show. It's think of Groupon on a kind of per show basis. But beyond that, I just don't think people watch television or films to shop.
So we're going to open it up to audience questions in a minute, but I do have one additional question for you. And that is around the startup experience. You're all kind of involved in this in various stages. And I wanted to ask you, some of the startup CEOs that I've talked to recently have said, particularly in this space, have said that there's just so many opportunities and potential partners that they can be talking to. How do you prioritize? How do you work with your funders when you're prioritizing all the different opportunities that you could go after, either spending more time operationally going after meeting particular milestones, or looking forward to the future and working on new business development strategies or new product strategies, or even potentially pivoting your business into a new area? How do you think through some of those decisions right now?
So, I mean, we always focused on revenue. Yeah. So if we had a partnership opportunity with, someone like Comcast, for example, our assumption would be that we wouldn't be able to get much revenue out of it in the short term, because huge organisation, hard to deal with, hard to see money in the short term, and so our prioritisation was always what can we do which is going to be able to get us revenue in the short term, and never had any arguments about saying, well, this is what we're going to go after, because it was like we've been going, we did it for 7 years. Went through one of the biggest recessions we've had for a long time, and I'm really glad we did focus on revenue, because otherwise, it would have been every month going back and saying, hey, we need more money, because quite often things didn't go as quickly as we wanted to. And if the economy carries on like this, we're not going to be looking at the kind of growth in most startups that any of us really wanted when we started out. So I would say, always focus on the revenue.
I don't know. I would say that every startup company and every startup CEO should be first and foremost focused on building a great product. So if you get distracted with partnerships and you get distracted with revenue before you've built a product that people actually want to use, then you've got a problem. Secondarily, I think you have to focus on building an audience. And I think for the longest time, people were frustrated that, Twitter and Instagram and some of these products, well, I guess Instagram still hadn't been focused on monetization at all. But in reality, you have to build a big enough audience, and when you do, you will be throwing off enough interesting data. You will have, a variety of different revenue angles to pursue in the first place that you can start to pursue that. So you have to, heads down, build a product that people want to use. Secondarily, prove it by building a big audience, and you do that and you locate your partnership opportunities based on who can help bring you audience. And then if both of those things are working, I think there will be more than enough ways to monetize, deep consumer engagement in the media space. Then, it's just my bias.
I mean, I'll just agree with Mark on that point. I mean, I just in the answering of build a great product is to know what people want and tap into some sort of emotional desire that is not had been untapped before. I mean, you look at companies today that are getting lots of growth and success is, Pinterest. Like, they grew 2,000%, from 1 million to 3 million users in a couple months. Like, they've created it's about design, it's about user experience, it's about tapping into something that people didn't even know they had. And ultimately that goes into building an audience and then getting data and understanding, collecting things, and all of a sudden people pay attention. If you look at Instagram as an example, I mean, there was a problem, and people didn't even know there was a problem, which was that people just want to take better pictures. And they just said, well, we're going to use this sort of filtering concept to help people create better pictures. And that was it. I mean, like, fundamentally, if you think about it, and they made it super simple and made it easy to use, and they optimized the components, and they have, more than 10 million users, and they're still on the iPhone only. But that's what they were trying to solve for, is hidden emotional.
But there were other people. There was a dozen companies that identified and solved the same problem effectively with slightly different and maybe inferior products. So, there was Pick Please and Path. I mean, there was a bunch of companies that had the same insight, and I would argue a less compelling product. So
yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. The nuances are sort of hard to decipher. I mean, it's like Path just launched an updated version of their photo share, and they had to like reinvent themselves, and Color did something, and it's regardless of any company, it's not easy to figure out what people want.
I agree. Absolutely, you need a good product. You've got to have a good product. You need a degree of luck. Yeah.
You need a bit of luck, yeah, of course.
But the problem for me if you don't go after revenue, what do you do when you're getting great audience growth, but it's not quite the audience growth that you want? Yeah. And your spend is slightly faster than you want. How do you stop? If you're not going after the revenue, you're just going after audience. How do you stop yourself getting diluted?
You got to make a tough decision. You got to ask yourself every 3 months, hey, do I have something? And it's, we've seen, the sticky bits turntable sort of metaphor of like, hey, I thought it was doing X, and though partners are interested, like nothing, the youth data is not there. And, honestly, even from our company, people say, oh, check-ins is social TV and the second screen stuff. But, we've had to consistently try things to see what sticks, and only people internally in the company can look at the data and be like, this isn't like really taking off as much as we'd like. Unless you see hockey stick trajectory, and honestly, not only sort of top line growth, seeing retained usage to be maintained and consistently growing, you should really be questioning whether you have something.
Yes.
Again, I agree and disagree a little bit with both of you. I think if you're Zynga and they were thinking about revenue before thinking about anything else. So their products were fine but not great, but they didn't start a business and say, where's the revenue going to come? They started a business, and part of the game mechanic was that you spend money to do better in the game, which was brilliant. I think if you're going after ad dollars, and again, I spent 5 years working for some of the biggest brands in the world. If you don't have a big enough audience, you do not have a conversation with advertisers to do anything other than muck up your environment with low CPM remnant inventory. So to focus on ad revenue before you have an audience is a complete waste of time. You will offend your users away. You will create less than compelling experiences, and you won't make enough money to justify the risk factor there. So I think it kind of depends on the business that you're in. If you make a game, and you can include the spending of money within the game, not monetized by advertisers, as part of the game mechanic, that makes a ton of sense. If if you're Pinterest and you start with a couple 100,000 users and you create an ad unit that's instant monetization, who knows that whether they would have seen that growth or not. So I think it depends on the kind of product that you're building, the way you prioritize those three things.
Great discussion. Thank you. Let's open it up to audience questions now.
Or not.
It's a little hard to see.
Too many questions to choose from.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're getting a bit close to our time anyway. So with that, we'll thank our distinguished panelists. Thanks for the terrific discussion.